Welcome, dear friends. This is a Satsang, and my name is Lama. I was quite recently actually pronounced or announced as Lama, that it took place on inner planes, and did not take place in this physical realm of existence. And the name I was given was Lama. What I wanted to talk today in this satsang is actually about the path to realization or fulfillment. Realization or fulfillment of what? Of life, of existence. Although there may be some different views on the purpose of life, and there are schools that claim there is no purpose, that life is a sort of a divine game or lila, and that there is no inherent purpose in it. There is also another school of thought that claims that life has its purpose and that purpose can be realized or fulfilled. And although both schools have their merit, I'm more on the line with this other second school, which claims there is a purpose. That there is something where this life, as it's happening, is striving. There is some direction into which this life is going. And today I'm going to share with you my insight into that matter, what I experienced as truth about it personally. And that's the purpose of Satsang. The word Satsang has as its root the word Sat, what means or translates as truth. So Satsang is being in the company of truth. And the purpose of Satsang is that people who are present, that they can share their personal deepest experience of truth with the others, so that others would not only learn but also be inspired by that very personal, deep, intimate revelation of truth. And before I begin, I would start by a short chanting where you can join me. As a Lama, I have a special preference for the wisdom and teachings of Buddha Amitabha, or in Japanese, Amida. And the teachings of Amida Dharma are very relevant, I think, for what I'm going to talk about. So I think it would be a good idea that you join me for a bit in chanting Nembutsu, or let's call it mantra of Amida Buddha, although Nembutsu is much, much deeper and has different philosophical connotations than sheer understanding of mantra as it's common in the West. So let's spend some time in Nembutsu, and I will proceed with further explanation of how Amida Dharma relates to my understanding of where life is going, and what all this personal growth business is about, and especially what is it that I found in my life experience so far, and I'm more than 50 years old, what I found to be, let's say, stray paths or blind alleys in that endeavor. And what would be a real guiding standard or something that we can keep in mind when or while discerning if our spiritual efforts are correctly guided. Namo Amidabu, 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 Namo Amidabu. Namo Amidabu. Thank you very much for participating in this short Nembutsu. Main philosophical or theological point of Pure Land Buddhism and theory behind Nembutsu is that one's own will, one's own effort toward enlightenment is not enough. And in fact, not just enough, but it's actually impossible. It's the teaching that one individual alone cannot do anything to reach the final liberation or enlightenment. And that the liberation or enlightenment comes through other power, not through self-power. And without going now into details of the story of Amida Buddha and the sutra, Mahayana Buddhist sutra in which the story of Amida is being told, let's just say that Pure Land Buddhists entrust themselves to Amida as an active, saving power and grace, which is acting in the present moment, and believe that through that entrusting, they actually come into situation that eventually they could be saved from samsara or illusion. This is all very short and maybe unfair to otherwise very deep theology of Pure Land Buddhism. But I just wanted to make a note, a remark, that there is a whole religious school which places emphasis on other power and actually believes that an individual, just by him or herself, is not really able or capable to bring about one's own salvation or liberation. That is very interesting because in the context of the spiritual or Gnostic teaching that I'm proposing, the actual purpose of life is actually our fulfillment of our relationship with otherness. I'm using the word otherness to differentiate from personalities or masks that true being puts on in its relating with the universe and with other beings. So it is not about the fulfillment of relationship with others as personalities. Life is not about the personality of Lama perfecting relationship with other personalities. Relationship between personalities or between masks is actually what constitutes the world of samsara or the world of illusion. So we must look deeper than that. We must look into relationship which is below the surface. But the problem is that there we enter into the realm which in Buddhism is being described by the teaching of anatta, or absence of self. Because the self, or ego, actually exists only in the realm of samsara, in the realm of illusion. And beyond that, when we want to go into that realm where our mutual relationships or contact that we have with each other can be fulfilled, we go into the realm which is beyond self or beyond ego. And we can say that self or ego cease to exist. We can actually say that whole life, what life is a relationship. Life is not some static scene where some events happen. Life itself is that relationship. Relationship which is fulfilling itself right now, this moment, while I'm talking. Life is about fulfilling itself. And that fulfillment comes through full contact between you as you are, not as your ego or your personality, but as you are. Full contact with the other, whatever that other is, as that other is, as it is. And reality of that otherness as it is what was described in Eastern teachings as tat, or that, it. Going into fulfilled relationship with it is actually what we call samadhi, or enlightenment. Fulfilling that relationship to the point where all the manifested aspects of existence cease to exist because they become unnecessary is the fulfillment of that relationship. Our ego and our personality traits, as well as matter itself and energy and space and time, are there just as means of us having indirect relationship with it. If we would enter into direct contact, full direct contact with it, we would have no need anymore, either for space or for time or for matter in any form or for energy, less any personality or ego or notion of I or anything like that. Therefore, we can say that the manifested world, the manifested existence, is a transient form which is there only as long as it is necessary in that universal endeavor of fulfilling our mutual relationships. The reason for our incarnation in body is to fulfill that relationship. That was the primeval motive behind incarnation, behind this becoming a form in matter and becoming a personality. In essence, all personalities are illusion. And whatever you think you are, you're not. But that which is beyond and at the base, at the bottom, at the very source or root of what you appear to be is what you are. As long as one is identified with whatever one appears to be, one can come to a specific kind of mental delusion that truths of oneself is somehow distinct or different from oneself. And that is when we can come to talk of such silly concepts like higher self or true self, as if it was something different from who or what you really are. However, there is no thing like that, really. There is only us. There is only our true nature as it is. And there is the appearance of that truth. How it appears is different from what it is, but it is not really something else. It is like that old parable of a mirror and a reflection in a mirror, where mirror and the reflection in it cannot be separated from each other. So it all actually boils down to the fundamental illusion of existence, not in a sense that it doesn't exist. On the contrary, it is very real, but it is simply not what it appears to be, what it appears to our perceptions and our mind. So transcending that, coming into contact, into real touch and contact with that otherness, is actually what constitutes that transcendence that I mentioned. It is not something that comes through your own effort of your own ego will. Actually, one's ego cannot do anything about one's liberation. What happens is that by a certain kind of grace, one decides to open up for it, that otherness as it is. We could say truth or reality as it is. But that truth or reality is a definite another. It's not some impersonal or blind reality which is somewhere out there. It's a definite and true, real another. And opening up for that another as it is and coming into contact with it. We are coming to know another as much as another is coming to know us as we are. And that's how we are improving our relationship until eventually we enter into a sort of union with it. It's not that we become one or something like that, it is impossible. But because we are essentially the same in our nature, it may just seem so. So the life is, at this moment, the ever-evolving relationship. And therefore it has a certain kind of direction. Life is not really directionless. It has a direction. And that direction is in that coming into contact or coming into touch, into deeper relationship with that otherness which is out there as it is. Now it comes to me as a very obvious thing that unless somebody is aware that there is some otherness out there to relate to, how one would know in the first place that there is anything to relate to? One wouldn't know. One wouldn't be aware of that. And I think that there are many people, probably majority of people on this planet, who are really not aware of that. They may be aware of other people around and other personalities, aware of other bodies around. But have you ever been in such a frame of mind yourself, or knew somebody who, had some kind of feeling how other people are somehow even unreal to that one? I mean, one notices their bodies and actions they do and effects that they produce, but somehow they themselves feel somehow unreal, or one just simply feels that one somehow doesn't know other people. doesn't have any kind of feeling of closeness to them. They may also be some kind of puppets who are, walking around and doing things, but one is simply unable to relate to anything what those puppets may really be inside. Sometimes there are other people who try to find or discover that otherness in religions and through the concept and notion of God. And there are many, many ideas of God. What is God? And as far as I could see, for a lot of people, the concept of God is also something very distant and unreal. And it really exists just as an idea in their minds. They have ideas of God, and they somehow try to live their religions, but in all honesty, it is very hard to relate to an idea. And especially if an idea is also mistaken. One can relate only to something what is real, and to something which is equal to you, something that has ability to be aware and has ability of choice. One cannot really relate to an idea or to piece of matter without consciousness and will and power of choice. Relating is really possible only with an equal individual. However, many are not aware of that. And so many people's attempts in what they think of as personal growth or spiritual development, or however you want to call it, actually begins and ends up in a world of ideas, in the world of thoughts and ideas. And to be honest with you, sometimes it all feels like some role-playing game, where one chooses a story or a plot that is most interesting for one, and then one's try to live that story, that plot. But actually, no real relating, no real contact happens because one is still enclosed into the illusory concepts of one's own mind. So the very first and essential step in, let's say, on the path of liberation is to find or discover that there is an other, that there is a real otherness with which it is possible to relate to. And an important an important point, which is part of this Gnostic teaching that I'm imparting now to you, is that the consciousness itself comes into being as a result of that relating. In other words, if you were all just by yourself, without any contact whatsoever with anything else, there would be no consciousness. And that's actually what constitutes unconsciousness. Unconsciousness is a full withdrawal from contact. On the opposite side of a spectrum, if you had full contact with another, full contact, full relationship, fulfilled relationship, there would be no consciousness either. But there would be a state of full knowledge. And that knowledge, which is not mental kind of knowledge or intellectual or mental or related to mind, but knowledge which comes as a natural outcome of full direct contact with it as it is actually what gnosis is. That's the kind of knowledge that we talk of when we talk of gnosis. However, in between those two states, one of full unconsciousness and lack of knowledge, and this other pole or other side of the spectrum where there is also non-consciousness but with full knowledge, in between we have a gradient scale of consciousness. So consciousness is a state of our relationship with another, and can be more of it or could be less of it depending on our state of relationship. As we grow in our contact with divine other, let's call it that way, because we are not talking about personalities, we are not talking about beings, we are talking about true nature. As our contact with that true nature of that divine other grows, so our consciousness grows, until a moment when even that consciousness is transcended and only direct knowledge and a state of bliss remains. And that is what is meant in Eastern teachings by Sat Chit Ananda, meaning truth and existence and bliss. Because there is no indirect relating at that point. So we can say that consciousness is a state of our indirect relating with divine other. And consequently, all of us right now are in a state of indirect relating with another. We are partly in contact, we are partly in relationship with the truth, and partly we're not. We are partly withdrawn. We are partly suppressing some part of truth. If we haven't, we would be in full contact, we would be in full relationship, and therefore in full knowledge, in samadhi, in nirvana, however you want to call it. So the first step is to discover the truth, to discover the existence of that divine other. Awakening of that consciousness, of that awareness, constitutes an initiatory step in itself. In the context of that Pure Land Buddhism, which I mentioned at the beginning, it's the awakening of faith, or Shinjin, as they call it. In the context of our Gnostic teachings, it would constitute the first of the four major initiatory steps. And it is totally naive to think of those four initiatory steps as something which can be received or completed in a year or 2 years or during some short training with some Gnostic bishop or something like that, or that it can be imparted by any ordination ceremony. Because ordination ceremonies and the structure of the Gnostic Church are symbols of those initiatory steps, which in some cases may probably take several lifetimes, who knows. But the first one, which would correspond in the Gnostic Church scheme to the degree or level of subdeacon, is essentially to discover the reality of that otherness. Why? Because unless one discovers that it is real, how we can expect that somebody works toward evolving the relationship with it? You cannot evolve relationship with something which is unknown to you. You first must get to know it. And after you get to know it, then you can start the project of learning more about it, and surrendering yourself more into that relationship so that it can grow. And only when that relationship grew to a certain extent that certain phenomena show up in you and in your life, and I can talk about it more in some of the following talks. When those phenomena show up, one could be said to become a priest and take on a priestly role. And I will try in the next few talks to share with you my understanding of those essential 4 steps or orders of the Gnostic Church of subdeacon, deacon, priest, and bishop, and what those levels entail. So for the first talk, let it suffice to say that the first level, or the first grade or degree of ordination, the one of the subdeacon, is primarily related to the discovery that there is something to relate to, that there is a divine another. And there can be many ways how to do that. Like now we enter into the realm of methods. And there is one particular method which involves communication as a tool that I will gladly talk, maybe in my next talk. So to sum up this one, because I'm not making these talks on basis of any bullet points or notes, but just right from the top of my head, what may be a good idea or maybe a bad idea, we will see, is that life is not a feather, that life got a certain particular purpose, and that purpose is in fulfillment of our relationship with divine otherness. But in order to enter into that relationship, to start working on it, we first must come to know that divine otherness, not just through me telling you about it or through reading about it, but through personal experience, through personal revelation. So it will be a matter of you experiencing this truth directly for yourself, not because somebody else told you. And that would be the first experience of gnosis, truly, for one. And the first essential spiritual experience on the path. And then we can go from there in these talks, and I could explain more what happens after one discovered that. But first we will cover how to do that and what methods could be employed in that purpose. In any case, the false notion of ego or I or self as being a definite or material or fixed thing located in space and time and separate and different from others is an illusion which at the very beginning has to be seen through. And sooner one sees through illusion of that and comes to know one's own true nature, which is essentially the same as the true nature of everything else, the sooner one can actually start this path of liberation. Many assume that self-enlightenment is some kind of the end of the path. In truth, self-enlightenment is actually the beginning of the path. And many schools, like for instance some schools of Zen, inadvertently created illusion, especially in Western minds, that experiencing Kensho or Satori, as they call it in Zen, is the end of the whole endeavor, and that self-enlightenment is what it is. However, it's just the first ring of a ladder. It's just the first important, unavoidable step in the process. It's not a definite end in itself. And coming back to the truth of the illusion of self, which was expounded in Buddhism very much, but not only in Buddhism. Actually, it was also expounded in some more esoteric schools of yoga in truth. Many don't know it because they think that yoga schools, with their insistence on Atman, actually were in opposition to Buddhism. But I would say it's all just wrong reading of the scriptures and misunderstanding of the scriptures. But anyway, when we come to the realization of the falsehood of self, then it becomes easier also to understand why we started this talk with Nambutsu chanting from the Pure Land school. The school which puts all its reliance on other power, totally ignoring the ego or self-power. And we did it just because of that. The self by itself is an illusion, and an individual by itself can do nothing except open up for the perfection of the relationship that we are all in and which we call life. And there are particular laws or principles on which this mutual relationship we call life is based on. So sooner we learn about those and try to adjust and adapt our lives and our spiritual practice so it can be based on those principles, the sooner we can feel that our own individual lives are going in the right direction and that we are fulfilling the purpose of life somehow. This also relates to the Tilima doctrine of true will. which is unfortunately also very misunderstood. And of course, that true will of the book of the law got nothing to do with ego or with notion of self, and it actually transcends it completely. And that the nature of true nature of ourselves and others is love. And that is the nature of this relationship we are in. So we can say that the life itself is there because of love, and it is based, it's firmly rooted in love, and that the relationship we are in is love. So fulfilling that relationship, establishing full contact and relationship and full knowledge between ourselves with divine otherness is the complete and full fulfillment of love as divine love or agape. But I think it would probably be a topic for another talk or another satsang. So what I shared with you today are some truths about life that I experienced myself, and I wanted to share it with you as truth. And I did my best not to tell you anything that I'm not certain that I experienced it experientially for myself as the truth, because that is the purpose of a satsang. And if this inspired you in any way or gave you something to ponder upon, or as I already said, simply inspire you, I think this satsang served its purpose. So I'm giving you my love and my blessings, and I hope that I will have another opportunity to record my message to you, and that hopefully, God willing, as they say, you may find it useful for something in your lives. God bless you all.